it's in the chat box or with from agents or clients that say, well, this isn't my experience. This is what I've seen. I really value that. So yeah, I'm ready to go, and we'll try and keep it short and welcome any input.
I started the recording, so it should be all good.
Well, good evening, folks. Appreciate you y'all making time to join us this evening. And of course, as Jeremy indicated, this is being recorded. This is our part of our series, Fireside Chats, and um, my topic this evening is farmland rental rates. This is a topic I've probably been involved with for, wow, I guess going on 20 years now, and um, it's a topic of never-ending fascination to me. It's a critical issue in Shenandoah Valley region. I'm going to share data that's really from across the whole northern tier of Virginia, um, but it's an issue all around the state. However, in the poultry producing counties, as the data will show, and we'll get into that, um, there are some particular points, and it really centers around the number of commercial farms we have, in particular the major poultry producing counties, Rockingham, Augusta, Shenandoah, and Page. um, that there's clearly a more intense competition for land in those counties, and we'll talk more about that. um, this is a point. This is actually some data that I kind of gleaned from a Jim Garish presentation here. Oh gosh, it's probably been 7 years ago now, but these trends have continued, and there's very few presentations anymore where I've talked to producers that I don't share this. Um, the kind of soundbite point is that in 1973, when Vermeer rolled out its first commercially available round baler, which is a revolutionary piece of equipment in terms of haymaking, um, that state of the art round baler from Vermeer sold for $4,000, and at that time, that was before the big price or big crash in cattle prices, and the value of 7 slaughter steers would pay for that round baler. And if we flash forward to the day in 2020, you're looking at north of $40,000 for a brand new round baler, depending on make and model and how many bells and whistles and size and lots of different um, variations on that technology today. But now you're talking in terms of anywhere from 27 to 30 head of slaughter steers in terms of farm gate value for slaughter ready steers. It takes 28 to 30 head of steers to to buy that round baler. And we see the same pattern in milk. This is a slide I prepared actually for kind of a non-agricultural audience, and so I expressed the milk in gallons. But once again, it's about a fourfold um, it's about a fourfold differentiation in the rate of inflation. And so it's simply the value of our product at the farm gate has not kept up with the cost of the inputs, and that it really shades everything we talk about in production agriculture in this region, because we see this across all the agricultural commodities, whether it's beef cattle or milk or vegetables or most any raw agricultural product coming from the farm. We see this disparity in inflation of the value of the crop relative to the cost of your critical capital inputs. Um, and another truism that I've kind of gotten more comfortable with, and when we talk about agricultural production in our region, we're a lot more like Ireland than we are Iowa. And in fact, I had a conversation just today. Was trying to kind of learn a little more about custom work rates and the issues around that, which has some similarities to land rental. And talking about custom combining, and talked to a gentleman who has done on the order in years past, in the order of 2,000 acres of custom combining up and down the valley. And I asked him, how many times do you take the header off your combine in the course of a season? He said, I don't know. I don't even like to think about it. And that's because our narrow roads, windy roads, and we're just not a land of great big wide open fields like Iowa. And that has a significant impact on um, our approach to farming, our labor efficiency, and all those factors. Um, so I'm going to get to land rental rates, but I'm going to underline this one more time. We kind of look at the typical pattern of of a of either a full-time farm or a significant part-time operation, because of course, we look in up and down the I-81 corridor and across the northern Piedmont, the majority of our farms are part-time operations. They rely on our farm income. In the poultry producing counties, of course, um, that has afforded a lot more folks to stay on the farm thanks to poultry production contracts. And so this is kind of a model for these poultry producing counties, because I threw in a graphic showing the two poultry houses on the home farm. Um, you get outside of the poultry producing regions, they don't have the houses, but it's the same concept. You have a home farm that's home base, and it's host traditionally to a little bit of cropland, and it's where most of the operation takes place. But as whether they're part-time or full-time, um, they want to expand, then land rental is the logical it's a logical choice. And more often than not, beef cattle is the enterprise of choice. Now, we do have folks that rent land for crop production, particularly in Shenandoah Valley. We've got a high demand for, and we enjoy a positive basis on corn. So, this land, you also see land rented out for crop production. But this this is kind of the pattern with a home base and then these outlying parcels. And interesting, if you can see my cursor, interestingly, more and more we see these parcels that they are not fenced, or the fences have degraded to a point that, or they have been subdivided and they no longer have the infrastructure, namely the water, um, and the corral and handling facilities to handle livestock. So they're exclusively for crop production and hay, and that has an impact in terms of where those fit, in terms of what's the competitive rental rate on those parcels, where we're limited on our options of what we can do with that land. Um, so interestingly, when you look at the trends in land rental rates, and I'm not going to share, or rather, I'm sharing data from National Agricultural Statistics Service, um, because they have a more robust um, survey system than what we've worked with in Extension, and that's an effort that I've led in years past. I want to share this data, mainly for its consistency and also its statistical validity, that you see land rental rates have not changed that much, maybe a slight trend upward. And based on my conversations with farmers and what I'm observing, I think that this very slight trend upward in, this is cropland. Next slide, we see pasture land rental rates, similar pattern, maybe not quite the same significant trend, but in the cropland, a trend upward. And I think that's more a function of there's fewer acres available to rent. Um, the and I often have conversations with landowners, who ask, they make the point, well, we haven't raised the rental rate in 15 years or 20 years, and it's really time we probably raise the rate. And I'm always very quick to come back to them. Well, why do you want to raise the rate? And they said, well, it's been 20 years. And I said, well, the profit margins, if anything, have gone down. They're actually, the farmer who rents that land is actually on average making less per acre per year. Now, I would be remiss not to point out, in Rockingham and Augusta, there's certain regions of those two counties in particular, but also in um, Shannon and Page as well. You've got certain communities where rental rates will be much, much higher than this. And I know a lot of folks, particularly in Augusta and Rockingham, would look at the cropland rental rate or even these pasture land rental rates and would say, well, boy, I'm paying a lot more than that. And we do have communities, particularly in areas where there's a concentration of dairy and poultry operations, where the competition for land can be very intensive, and we can see the rental rates move significantly higher than what's shown here. And that's where I think, um, um, counties like Rockbridge. I don't have data here from Culpeper and Madison, Frederick, and Warren counties, but there you see rental rates that are consistently lower than what you see in Rockingham and Augusta. Um, and that really is driven by competition. We also saw, anecdotally, I can say we saw a significant spike in pasture land rental rates around 2014, 2015, and that was driven by the spike in cattle prices. But time has told us that those rental rates were not sustained. One quick, if you want to, I'm glad to share this data. You're welcome to email me. One interesting note, and I've struggled to collect land rental information from farmers in the region, and the National Agricultural Statistics Service has as well. You'll notice 2016, there's a number there in italics. I've got my cursor around it. That's because that particular year for pasture land rental rates, the Agricultural Statistics Service was not successful getting a significant number of respondents specific to Rockingham County. So they had to use a like a 20 county average for that particular year in Rockingham County. I think that's why we see that dip down that year. Otherwise, that trend you can see has played out in Rockingham County in pasture land rental rates. When we talk about land rental rate, I do talk to a lot of landowners, and I'm always really try to coach the landowner about their expectations and what are realistic expectations. And there's a lot of landowners. Their grandfather, they had grandparents or great grandparents that owned the land or had the farm, or they've purchased the farm because they love Shenandoah Valley. It's a beautiful place to live. And this picture on the left is their perception. That's what they expect. And that's what they want to see. And managing those expectations is a really big part of the relationship between landlord and farmer tenant. Here's a couple pictures on the right of some of the realities. There's our old friend Autumn Olive, and this is taken during the winter. You can see, but there's a bunch of wing stem stickweed sticking up here in the pasture, and or something I know just really makes some landowners really grind their teeth, is our tracked up fields and mud, and and that has prompted, I know, a lot of landowners. They say, well, just come make it for hay. I just don't want to put up with the cattle, and so really coaching the landowner in terms of what their expectations are, but also successfully, I think the successful farmers more and more are going to try and meet some of those expectations of the landowner. So there's definitely a give and take there. And I know some successful farmers that rent a fair bit of land, and there's a certain aspect of this aesthetic that the farmer tenant is able to meet when they're successful. This is the photo I like to share. This is a farm that's rented. I'm familiar with the circumstance. It's rented year to year for beef cattle production. And those of some, I think some on the call are kind of familiar with what we see here. The underlying soil type here is a Frederick Silt loam. And the term of the lease is 12 months. So from 1 year to the next, the cattleman's been there a number of years, but from 1 year to the next, the cattleman doesn't necessarily know whether they're going to have it the next year or not. So it's been some time since they've invested in any lime or fertilizer on this farm. But the underlying soil on this farm is a Frederick Silt loam. It's actually a very productive soil. So the potential on this farm is very comparable. Now, here's a farm. Some of you may be familiar with this farm. This is a dairy. And the point I want to make here is what you're looking at is Frederick Silt loam. And so the difference between this farm and this farm, they are fundamentally identical farms. The real underlying difference here is the land rental agreement. This farm is a year-to-year rental agreement, just a 12-month term. So the farmer tenant has no incentive to invest in the farm. This is an interesting situation. A very successful dairyman who, early in his career, or really what empowered him to um, launch the farm business he has, is a 15-year long-term lease. And I'm not suggesting that every landowner should enter into a 15-year long-term lease. That's a pretty exceptional circumstance, but I think it does illustrate the power that that tenure on the land offers. And this gentleman who runs cattle on this farm, he doesn't need a 15-year lease in order to invest in this property. But I think an 8-year lease would really make the difference. Um, so, and I'm just going to wrap things up here. Kind of touch on what I think are the highlights when we look at this relationship between the landowner and the farmer tenant. These are not in any particular order. Some landowners prioritize some things above others. For some landowners, the price they get that's paid is more important. Some landowners will prioritize the price paid, but then the relationship quickly sours if the other three are not, or particularly 1 and 2 are not addressed. The appearance of the farm, and I've yet to encounter a landowner who does not expect that the entire farm to be mowed at least once a year. And in general, really good landowner and farmer tenant relationships is the more that farmer is there and the sooner in the season they can get that farm mowed, um, and perhaps do some additional mowing late season, that really fosters a good relationship because the landowner really appreciate the aesthetic appearance of the farm. Fence maintenance is a really difficult issue. It's a very expensive, just like the cost of the round baler or other capital improvements. Fence is extremely expensive relative to the value of the product. I generally recommend that the landowner pay for the cost of fence materials and the tenant provide the labor or pay the cost of labor. Now that's a really quick um, suggestion, and there's a bunch of caveats that go with this depending on what kind of fence is being built and how much of it. But fence maintenance can be a real point of contention between landowner and farmer tenant. If you are renting farmland, you really want to broach the topic and make sure that landowner has the land enrolled in agricultural use assessment. As a farmer tenant, you can be a real hero to the landowner because you save about 85 or 90% on real estate taxes on that raw land. So that's an important benefit to the landowner. And then ultimately, if something I've already touched on, of course, is the price you pay for that rented land. And a lot of factors go into that, not the least of which is competition. So I could go on quite a long time about land rental, but we do mean this to be, as we stick to our intention of our title, Fireside Chat. So I wanted to hit the highlights, and I certainly welcome, glad to take any questions that are in the chat box or share any thoughts or comments.
There's no chats right now, but if somebody wants to unmute themselves, you should be able to do that and ask any questions.
Hey, Tom, this is Mark.
Hello, Mark.
Appreciate your presentation. And do you have any sense of what the land use value, what the actual rental, excuse me, not rental, the property taxes are for Valley landowners that are in the land use program?
The assessed values, the assessed values for agricultural use range in the kind of $400 to $800 per acre range. And colleagues, you're welcome to jump in here and correct me. Probably my primary resource for that is the Agriculture Economics Department has an office called the State Land Evaluation. SLEAC, State
Land
Land
Use
Evaluation Advisory
and,
Committee.
yeah.
SLEAC, State Land Evaluation Advisory Committee. And there are two staff people at Virginia Tech. They work year round developing county specific agricultural land use values. And you can go to that site if you're not familiar with it. You can Google SLEAC, SLEAC, Agriculture Economics, Virginia Tech. And you can see their data, or I'm glad to send you what they have. But they use agricultural statistics to come up with an average farm in for that particular county based on agricultural statistics. Now, interestingly, they do not use livestock enterprises. It's based entirely on crop production. So it's kind of a until you kind of get into it, it seems like a really strange way to come up with those values. But their focus is they want something that's statistically valid. And so, but those are the numbers they come up with, and that's really what most commissioners of revenue rely on. Now, some commissioners of revenue, all commissioners of revenue have the latitude and can use a different valuation process, but they have to be prepared to defend it, and could find themselves in court defending it. But and that's what really drives the SLEAC approach to arriving at those agricultural use values. But in general, to answer your question, I'm kind of rambling a little bit here. To answer your question, they will run kind of in the $400 up to maybe $800 per acre, which it's about 20% of typical assessed values for raw land. A lot of raw land on the I-81 corridor will assess at $5,000 or more per acre.
So what's the tax rate in Augusta County right now? It's been a
John
while
Benner,
since
can you help me with that? I don't know.
John, it's been a while since I've tracked that. 50 cents, 60 cents, I can't remember.
I think I want to say 60 cents, but I don't know.
60 cents per 100. So, the owner is paying, $2.50, $4 an acre, and the pasture rental is getting them whatever it was, $20, 26. I just
Right.
was just ballpark kind of getting a sense of it.
So it's a significant savings. Now, a lot of the conversations I have with landowners, I've had conversations with landowners, and they look at their rental rate and they say, well, that doesn't even pay the taxes. And I pretty quickly point out, well, it's more than paying the taxes on your land. Those cows may not be covering the taxes on your $500,000 home. Well, I don't say $500,000 home, but often the landowner has significant improvements on that farm, and those, of course, are not eligible for, they're not incorporated. They're held outside of the agricultural land use assessment, and so that's often, particularly on smaller acreages that landowners are renting out. They look at their tax bill and they expect the farmer tenant to cover that whole tax bill, and that's tough to do if there's some really valuable improvements on a relatively small piece of land.
And Tom, how often do you or Extension conduct rental surveys?
Well, I'm sitting on some data right now, and I appreciate you answering that question, because it's part of it is to answer your question, it's every other year.
Every other, okay. Yeah.
Every other year. Now, I am I've got to do a better job. The number of responses we're getting has not been as good, and so we've really got to try and devise a better way to collect the data. And the advantage the Ag Statistics Service has is that they're set up specifically for collecting that data. They've got name, address, contact information, and control who they survey. and they have the personnel to actually go to the farm and visit. And I have not made the time to, and I think that's really the next step in terms of really fleshing out the rental data. Is it's going to take that higher touch, um, uh, person to person contact. When you have a conversation about land rental, particularly if folks feel assured that you're going to keep it confidential, folks are glad to talk about it, as long as they know that the information that's going to be isn't going to be shared around and you know inappropriately used. But the people are good about having the conversation. They're just not real good about filling out a survey card and sending it in the mail. So.
Well, here's another question for you guys, maybe straying from the subject just a wee bit, but you all have years of experience with an extension over multiple counties and a lot of interactions with landowners who rent their farmland. Do you guys have any sense as to what those landowners are doing with their forest land? I'm assuming in most cases, if not all, the farmer isn't paying any rental on the forest. The farmer is interested in the open land, the hay, pasture, cropland, what have you. In your interactions over the years with landowners who rent their open ground to farmers, what are they doing with their woodlands? Are they renting them to hunt clubs? Or is there a hunt club rental of the whole area? A little bit of dovetailing with the open land. Obviously, what are landowners doing with their woodlands insofar as regular annual income, if anything?
Well, I'll jump in, but I certainly welcome any other input. I've actually had a lot of conversations about timberland and forest land. Most notably, I very frequently get a call from a landowner, and the first thing out of their mouth is, "I have a 300-acre farm in whatever county," and I immediately kind of sit on the edge of my seat and oh really? Tell me more about it. And I have learned the first question I have to ask is, okay, well, how much of this 300 acres is open?
There you go. Right, of course.
And they say, oh, I guess probably 30 acres are open. And
Yeah.
as a livestock guy, I kind of immediately deflated. It's like, oh, okay. But I quickly say, okay, I usually first thing is, I said you really need to think about your timber management because that's a significant opportunity. And we usually I kind of quiz them a little bit if they've ever harvested timber or when was the last time timber was harvested, and I refer them to Department of Forestry and say I really encourage you. It's a free service, and they'll come out and kind of walk you through and can kind of get an overall evaluation of the timberland and give you some ideas in terms of the long run management of it. And so that's how I've most often handled it.
Well, that's a very good answer, Tom. I appreciate it.
well, of course, my wife used to be with Department of Forestry, and I've developed a real appreciation for the service they provide. And and of course, when you look across the state, we've got got a tremendous amount of timber out here of a huge range of potential. Some of it's all junk, and just really just probably all needs to be cut down and replanted and but then there's some that's really nice, and even not as a non-forester you can tell there's something pretty good there. But referring to Department of Forestry is one of the things I've done. Of course, Adam Downing's been really good about reaching out to landowners like that own a high percentage. They have tracts of land that are predominantly timberland. So
Hey, Tom, I don't see any questions in the chat, so I think if there's anybody else that has any questions.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. And